Hello, I'm here to talk a little bit about hats, specifically Akubra hats. A hat made in Australia, and to ask the advice of you folks as to whether or not I made a good choice, or whether you maybe never want to see me in this hat again. And I can arrange that too. So this is my Catalina hat made in America. Love their product, but a hat like this costs $500 or $600 now. They're custom hats, they're good hats, they'll last a long time, but you can get them looking ugly quick enough that I save these for good. So I got to thinking about Akubra when my wife said to me, she had had a bout of skin cancer and had to have some surgery and had a skin graft and all of this on her face. And everything came out real well, but she's very vigilant about keeping herself covered up from the sun, sunblock, and she said, I want a big hat. Where would you get a big hat? I don't want necessarily anything real Western, but I don't want some kind of bonnet. I want to be able to ride it or wear it when we go riding and so forth. So I said to her, how about an Akubra? And she said, a what? And if you folks have been following the channel for a while, I think I had a thing or two up on this. I spent about 6 or 7 months in Australia when I was a young guy, and working on a cattle station part of the time, starting a bunch of colts, and so on. And the one thing I got acquainted with were the hats they wore down there, because they live in a sunny country, and nobody knows much better how to cover up than the Australians. And Akubra is the Australian hat. That's the go-to hat. In fact, the Akubra company is the last fur felt hat maker in Australia. And by all accounts, they're thriving. So this is the hat that my wife got. And this is more the true Australian style hat. It broken down in the front, broken down in the back, almost straight across, and it'll sit on top of my head like but it gives you an enormous amount of coverage without having a huge brim. And this hat comes unlined, keeps it a little cooler, and it's got some eyelets. It's probably not a summer hat. We're getting her a straw hat for that, but for the fall and mild winter days in the spring, this is really going to serve her well. So, taking a little warning from her experience with too much sun exposure and having been exposed too much most of my life, I thought, well, maybe I ought to get one of these hats too. And I started looking at them. Now, Akubra makes mostly Australian type hats. They'll make something like, frankly, you'd expect on Demand from Snowy River or one thing or another. They made hats for that movie. They made hats for Crocodile Dundee. They made hats for the Australian military, over 2 million of them. When you see that Australian hat with the side tapped up, you know, the slouch hat or the digger hat, that was an Akubra. And I don't think they're making military hats anymore, but at one time they were the supplier of the entire Australian military. It's a company that's been around since 1876. It's been owned and run by the same family that entire time. I think it's the 6th generation, and it's continued to do well. So they have some Western style hats as well. I would call them semi-Western. And I didn't want a hat with as much upturn as we have on our hats here. I wanted some sun coverage too. And this is what I came up with. Now, this hat that my wife has is called the Riverina, after an area in Australia. Mine has a little punchier name. It's called the Golden Spur. Not that I need a golden spur, but now I'm going to put this thing on and I need to hear whether I should keep it, toss it out, or keep it and wear it in private, which is probably what I'd do if I got too much pushback. So here's the great unveiling, or the great rehatting for my day-to-day work hat. So they sit a little deeper and they cover a little more, and I'm standing here with the sun going down over there and just putting this hat on, I don't have the sun in my eyes as much. So I suspect if I can't see the sun, maybe the sun can't see me. A couple of things if you're at all interested in a hat like this. Akubra is Akubra. You can buy them, some of the styles from the David Morgan Company. Most of the Western styles, though, are going to be directly from Australia. There's a great hat store over there called Hats by the Hundred, and that's where I got this hat. My wife got this from David Morgan here in the States. I think they charged me $19 to ship this. Catalina charges me $40. I understand they send them, they keep them safe. They're big. It costs something to box them up and ship them, but I thought to get from Australia to here for 19 bucks was good. So one thing to think about if you have any interest in a hat like this, size up one tick. So if you're a 7, get a 7 1/8. If you're a 7 1/8, get a 7 1/4, because they size a little small and they do draw up a bit. Now this hat kind of shrank down on me a little bit. This is a 7 3/8. Normally I wear a 7 1/4. What I did, and I've done this in the past, when I want to kind of get a hat to fit my head, I don't have a steamer, and I'm a little cruder person than using a steamer. So I just take a little tack sponge, dip it in some clear water, and then I'll peel back the inside sweatband and just moisten that area in there. You don't want to saturate it, but just moisten it. And then I'll put a little here right along the brim and right above the hat band, but not a whole lot. And it's amazing how much that little bit of water, I didn't even squeeze out the sponge, it just softens that hat up, and then I'll wear that till it dries. And that way, when it dries, it'll be conformed to my head. And I've done that a couple of times, and each time it gets a little bit better. It's more my shape. Because these hats, the Catalina hats, come in a long oval if you need that, and that's what I wear. The Australians must be round-headed, because Akubra doesn't seem to have a long oval option. Maybe they do, but I couldn't find it. So what I've done is this little trick, which gets it conforming to your head, and my head must be more oblong, and in the end, the hat's going to be oblong, but you need to give it that little bit of help. The fact is, many hats shrink, and I've started using one of these devices. It's called a hat jack, and you can use that to stretch a hat or just to keep your hat in shape. So whenever I put a hat away, I've got, they're not real expensive and they last your whole lifetime. They soak up moisture into the wood component, because you want to get a wood one, not a plastic one. And you can see there's a threaded sort of a bolt that goes down into the wood, and you can crank it smaller or crank it bigger. And then you just align that with your hat, put it in. Now I've got that a little bit too large, so I'll crank that back a little, and then it'll fit in there, and we're good to go. And if you need to stretch your hat, you just crank it out. Now you're not going to stretch it 2 sizes or something, but you can ease it up. And you probably want to do that in easy stages. You could also dampen your hat a little bit, as I did with this hat. And these things are like gold, because every hat draws up a bit. And I see people at the horse shows, they got grooves in their head, and that's not comfortable. So hat jack is a great thing. Make a great gift for some cowboy or cowgirl in your life too. So I'm not selling anything, but I'm kind of getting enthusiastic about these hats. This has really helped my wife out outside, and I think this one I'm going to wear around the farm at least. And the kicker is, as I said, a hat like this will cost $500 to $600, and they're just going up, and it's just the nature of things. The Akubra hat is less expensive, even though it's pure fur felt. It's not made with beaver. You could look a long time in the deserts of Australia and not find a damn beaver. They're made with rabbit fur. There's tons of rabbits in Australia. Now I understand for some of their higher end hats, they actually import special rabbit fur. But my understanding is the roots, and still one of the go-tos, is native rabbit, of which there are billions. And so they're not as expensive. This hat might be $600. This hat here was $200. This one was the same. You can afford to buy them, wear them out, and use them up. So you can also get them in a Western style if you don't want to look quite as down under. So if that would work for you, great. Let me know if you think it's working for me, or let me know if I ought to hide my head, literally. Till then, good day.